This is History Myths and Misconceptions. And today's misconception is Alexander the Great was a Greek. Let's get things straight. We're not saying that Alexander the Great wasn't a Greek. We're saying that there is a certain misconception about ancient Macedonians which should be addressed. And it is possible to look at the problem from different angles. Alexander the Great was a Greek, and at the same time, he wasn't. First and foremost, he was a Macedonian. Should we consider Macedonians a regional variation of the Hellenes? Well, maybe it depends on what you're trying to prove, because this question has a political dimension, especially right now. Frankly, this dimension is quite stupid, but it's there. Almost every modern discussion about how distinct were Macedonians from Greeks stumbles upon yet another Balkan Special Olympics. This time involving A. the present-day state of Greece, which includes the majority of the historical region of Macedonia. B. the present-day state of North Macedonia, previously known as Macedonia, and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, which includes the historical region of Ionia and the northern part of historical Macedonia. And C. occasionally it also features Bulgaria, which includes mostly the historical region of Thrace, but participates in this Special Olympics with the idea that modern Macedonians are in fact a regional variety of Bulgarians who speak with a weird accent, and not a real nation. So whatever you say about ancient Macedonians, the territory of Macedonia, the kingdom of Macedon, and its most prominent historical figures, you will always find an opponent. Now back to Alexander and his predecessors. We cannot interview ancient Greeks, because they are dead, but it seems that the majority of proper Greeks considered Macedonians a distinct barbarian group of people, which was either related to proper Greeks or very much Hellenized. Basically like stupid barbarian cousins who liked to drink too much. But nothing remains the same, except for the things that actually remain the same. So it seems there was a significant evolution of thought, and at some point Macedonians became more or less accepted as essentially a type of Greeks. The earliest mentions of Macedonians in historical sources give us some really interesting information. Herodotus, who invented Thucydides so that Thucydides could invent history, thought that Macedonians were Greeks, who thought that they were Greeks themselves, and that they were descendants of Dorians. He also thought that Indians emit seed, which is not white like that of other races, but black like their skin. But that's a different subject. It seems that the majority of Greeks were not so sure about the origins of Macedonians as Herodotus. Alexander, the other one usually known as Alexander I, the king of Macedon, who was more or less a contemporary of Herodotus, so he really wanted to participate in the Olympic Games. The real Olympic Games, not the North Macedonian /Greek /Bulgarian Games. But the Olympics were reserved only for the Hellenes. So Alexander had to present the evidence that he was in fact a Greek, because if you are a Macedonian, you cannot participate. So he proved that he was a descendant of the Argives, and was admitted to the games as an Argive, not as a Macedonian, according to Herodotus once again. So, as you can see, there is a certain contradiction here. There were other Macedonians who participated in the Olympics, but much later. The next Macedonian we know of, who was admitted to the Olympic Games, entered the competition almost a century after Alexander. The importance of Macedon increased over time, and the political climate was very different in the 4th century BC. Demosthenes was famously alarmed by the rise of Macedon and by the king of Macedon, Philip II, the father of Alexander the Great. In his Philippics, he insists that Macedonians are not Greek, although he doesn't call them barbarians explicitly. His political opponents, fellow Athenians, thought that Demosthenes worries too much. And anyway, Macedonians were known for endless rivalry between the clans and being terrible drunks. So it was kind of expected that at some point they all will get drunk during some feast and kill Philip. Because that's just what they did. That was the essence of Macedonian culture. It was a reasonable assumption. Both Demosthenes and his opponents were right. Indeed, at some point they all got drunk and Philip was killed during the feast. What do you expect? But it happened after he conquered pretty much all of Greece, save for Sparta, and not before. Philip obviously thought that he was quite Greek, and it was probably quite dangerous to disagree with him on this issue. It was expected that things would get back more or less to normal after Philip's death, but the Greeks were wrong. His successor, currently known as Alexander III of Macedon among the historians, and as the Alexander among everybody else, promptly ended the revolt against the Macedonian rule and destroyed the city of Thebes in the process. And then he figured out that the best way to broaden your horizons is traveling. So he went traveling. Xenophon's book served him as a Lonely Planet guide, and he never came back. A decade later, he, probably that's one of the theories, drank himself to death, proving that he was indeed a Macedonian. Alexander definitely believed that he was a Greek. He also believed that he was a god, which is actually kind of true. Alexander was deeply influenced by Greek culture. Well, who wasn't? And reportedly slept with the Iliad. It must be noted that Homer's Iliad consisted of 24 scrolls in the Library of Alexandria. So if you picture Alexander keeping 24 sizable scrolls under his pillow at all times, including the time when he founded Alexandria, then please stop doing that. Alexander was also a student of the most famous Macedonian philosopher ever, Aristotle. And if you think that the phrase Macedonian philosopher Aristotle sounds weird, that's because, well, I'm not gonna lie, it does sound weird. Something's inherently wrong here. Anyway, since Aristotle never drank himself to death, not even once, we can safely assume that he was a Greek. It is hard to say how exactly Alexander was perceived by his contemporaries, although he presented his Persian expedition as the expedition of the Hellenes. There is also this joke that there were more Greeks in the Persian army than in the army of Alexander, because the army of Alexander consisted mostly of Macedonians. And the successor states of his kingdom were obviously very, very Hellenistic, but they were the kingdoms controlled by the Macedonian dynasties. In a way, Cleopatra was not really a Greek queen, but a Macedonian queen. Or was she? Did anyone perceive her as a Macedonian queen? Probably not. It's quite hard to imagine this kind of phrasing. Macedon kept controlling Greece, and the Greeks were sporadically fighting for their freedom. But as the centuries pass, it kind of gets harder to present this struggle as a liberation war against the foreign oppressors. Unless you're a Roman. Because when Romans defeated the Macedonian forces in 197 BC, they promptly declared themselves the liberators of Greece. They had another couple of wars with Macedon since then, and they gradually absorbed Greece, because, come on, what do you expect? Of course they did. What is interesting, at some point, the distant, very distant descendants of Cleopatra, that notorious Macedonian queen, became the rulers of the Roman Empire. Unfortunately, we know them as Geta, Caracalla, Elagabalus, and Severus Alexander, the emperors of the catastrophic Severan dynasty. So, as you can see, the situation with Macedonian or Greek identity of Alexander or his predecessors or his successors is quite complex, and there is simply no easy answer. So yeah, Alexander the Great was a Greek, and at the same time, he wasn't.